all well. It has been a blah 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 blah. It has been a while since my it has been a while since my last podcast. So long that I had to check my summer knitting plans video to check what I had said about my works in progress to go on from there. If you're new here, my name is Catherine. I'm a knitter living in the French Alps. I share my knitting journey here on YouTube, on Instagram and also on Patreon. And today, grab yourself a nice cup of whatever beverage you wish to drink, your knitting or any other craft, and get cozy because this is going to be quite long, I think, and there's a lot to catch up on. So I thought I would start with, first what I'm wearing. This is the Kylie pullover, which I knit in the shortly sleeved version. So I knit the je vais pas y arriver, hein? I knit the short sleeved version in Seine Sweater liner in colorway raspberry, and it's a nice summer top. It's airy but also kind of warm, so I haven't been able to wear it during the heat wave, that's for sure, but the weather's kind of changed now. We've had gloomy weather for a week or so and I'm able to wear it inside, not outside today because today is just a very grey, weird day. We have rain, then sunshine, then rain again. I don't know how the lighting is going to go because it's quite grey outside. I don't know how it's going to come up on camera, we'll have to see. Editing me may have some work to do. I don't have a fancy mug today, I just have the good old Unijack mug. I thought I'd start with a little catch up, but if you want to skip to the finished project section, just do that, no problem. You can skip to the next chapter. So a lot has happened since my last podcast. I don't know why I can't say last today. Last podcast. Weirdly, my brain has a difficulty saying that today. As I was saying, a lot has happened. I feel like I haven't knitted that much, or at least not as much as I would have liked to. But I have been very busy with my small business. I'm currently setting up my website. I've been creating lots of illustrations and icons to make it unique. I've been having fun creating prints for you, digital downloads also, everything knitting related. I've been making stitch markers too, and all of that fun stuff. I used to be a graphic and web designer, so I'm having fun playing around with the website, and also a lot of fun creating all of the illustrations. I made icons for each category type, icons to illustrate my products, and also any e-commerce related term. I also had a lot of fun creating prints for you, yarn related prints. I also did spend a lot of time looking for a good print on demand service that would print good quality products nearest to your location to reduce the cost of transport but also the impact on the environment, which is always good. And the last thing I need to do before launching is finishing to put some of the stitch markers onto backing cards, and then taking more nice pictures to add to the product pages of the website. So everything should be done soon, and I do plan on launching my website in August. A little side note for my patrons of the alpaca tier, who will be able to finally use their discount code when the shop launches. Yay! And I think that's it for the small business. I also made a lot of progress on my knitting pattern, which I will talk about later on in the video. So what have I been knitting on these past weeks? Since my last podcast, I finished my 2 works in progress, I cast on 3 new projects, and I have made lots of progress on my knitting pattern design. I don't think I've talked about my design on my podcast before. I've shown you the yarn, I think, but I haven't talked about the design yet. So stay tuned for that part of the video. First of all, let's start with the Cumulus Blouse O-neck by Petite Knit, which I have finished and blocked. As I mentioned before, I have used Seine Sweater Seine Sweater Tin Silk Mohair in colorway Deep Red, which is 4236. My notes are down here and that's why I'm looking down. So yeah, 4236 for the color, and it was left over from a frog project. When I finished the body, I checked the length of it by putting the stitches on a barber cord to try it on and not lose any stitches. Then I started knitting the I-cord edging. It was my first time knitting an I-cord edging bind off, which also includes decreases in the bind off. I did read the instructions and also watch a video Petite Knit made explaining the technique. But once I was like halfway through the edging, I realized that something was wrong. The edging was looking too tight, and yeah, I realized that I was doing it completely wrong. You're supposed to do decreases at a given rate, and I was not following that rate at all. I was making too many decreases than required, and so I had to unravel everything, which was a lot of fun, and start again. Anyway, once I had a second go at it, it went fine. I wasn't sure I would have enough yarn to finish both sleeves. I wanted to weigh my yarn before starting the sleeves and then divide the amount I had left into both sleeves. But I forgot to weigh my yarn, and I realized that once I knitted a few centimeters. I decided to weigh the yarn anyway at this point, and to try and estimate how much I would need for one sleeve. Because I was playing yarn chicken and I didn't want to lose, I decided to not knit the full length of the sleeve, but knit those sleeves like it's like a 3/4 sleeve, and it ends just after the elbow. I like this length. It's not too short, it's not too long. One thing I did wrong is that in the instructions you're supposed to make decreases along the sleeve, and I completely forgot to do that. I just picked the stitches up at the armhole and just mindlessly knit until the length I wanted, and completely forgot about the decreases. So that's another thing I did differently. And once I realized this, I already bound off the first sleeve, so I decided to go with it and do the second sleeve the same way without any decreases. And I didn't lose the yarn chicken. Yay. And I still have some yarn left, so I could have made the sleeves even longer, but I was too afraid to not have enough, so it's okay. I'm happy with it as is. This is my first Petite Knit garment pattern. I did do her penny gloves, if my memory is correct, but this is the first time I've knitted a full garment and not just an accessory. And I have to say that the pattern is quite clear, but it's not the clearest I've followed. I mean, all of the instructions are there. It's just that it's not as clear as it could be for my brain, if that makes sense. It's just the presentation of the instructions aren't as clear as other patterns of other designers that I've already knit before, but that's just a personal preference. I'm a very visual person, and just having paragraphs and paragraphs of text explaining the instructions isn't the best way for me to present the information, but that's really personal. However, the construction is very easy to knit. It's a raglan construction, It's a raglan construction where you start by knitting the yoke, making increases at 4 points around the yoke, basically around the shoulders. And when you've finished knitting the increases, you basically split your work into the front section, the back section, and the sleeves by joining the front and back together, and you put your sleeve stitches on hold. You then continue knitting the body of the garment until the desired length and bind off. And then to finish, you pick up the sleeves and knit to this desired length and bind off also. There's really nothing complicated about the pattern. The overall fit is nice, and it was nice having a mindless knit to work on for a change. And yeah, I think it's, as I said, a very easy knit, especially for beginners. There's nothing too complicated. That the I-code edging is well explained, even if I did make a mistake in the beginning. On to my next finished project, which is the Fleur Cami by Brianna Mason, which is a delicate and lovely overall lace pattern V neck shaped top. That is a lot of adjectives in one sentence. It's knitted bottom up, where you start with a 1x1 ribbing. Then you continue onto the lace pattern of the body and knit the length of the body you want from the underarm. Once you're happy with the length of the body, you start knitting the triangles at the top of the garment. You knit one triangle at a time and put the other stitches on hold. Once you finish one front triangle, you continue knitting an I-cord strap, which is a lot easier than I expected. You simply knit 3 stitches or more if you want it to be wider than 3 stitches wide, and then slip them back onto your left needle without turning your work, and then just knit them again, and then do that, and you repeat it, and it just makes this cute strap. When all the triangles have been knitted, you stitch the strap to the top of the back triangle, and that's it. So you do that for each side of the top, and this is what you get. A cute little cami. It's called a débardeur in French, and it's very, very cute. In my last podcast, I did mention that I had just finished the body, I think. Since then, well, I finished it. It's all blocked, and I'm really happy with the finished garment and how it turned out. But I did have doubts and was afraid of the final shape of it because I had a gauge problem. After finishing the body, I blocked my work to double check the gauge before moving on to the triangles, and as it turned out, my gauge was completely off, and I don't really know why, because my gauge swatch was correct and my gauge in the project was off. I think maybe I'm knitting my gauge swatches too tightly and knitting my projects looser, therefore creating a difference in gauge, which is a pain because when I'm planning to knit something, I think my gauge is correct, but turns out it's not, and that the garment might not look like what it's supposed to look like. The recommended gauge in the pattern is 30 stitches by 40 rows per 10 centimeters or 4 inch, and after blocking the body I got 28 stitches by 45 rows, which is quite a big difference. When you're knitting a project that has a lot of ease, having a slight gauge difference isn't a big deal, because if you have an intended ease of 10 to 15 centimeters, for example, and you lose or gain a centimeter or two, that's okay, it's not going to change much. But when you have a garment that requires negative to no ease at all, that's gonna have an impact, especially for garments with specific designs and shapes. For example, this one has triangles, so if instead of having the recommended gauge, your triangles might look very, very wide or too tall, or you know what I mean, it's gonna impact the final shape of the design. So the body of my project was wider than expected, and so I was gonna have more ease than expected. My biggest problem was the difference in row gauge, which was way off by 5 rows, which is a lot. I initially thought I could maybe try and knit a size up for the top of the garment, but the stitch count for the bigger sizes for the triangles was too different from the size I knitted the body in. So I ditched that idea. I also looked at comments and other people's projects on Ravelry, and I did see someone who knit the triangles but with a different decrease rate, which led to taller triangles. So I hesitated between following that idea or sticking to the instructions in the pattern to see what I would end up with. So in the end, I knitted the triangles in the same way explained in the pattern and following the size I chose for the body, and it turned out great. So yeah, reminder, trust the process. Sometimes it just works out on its own and you just have to trust the process. After finishing the first I-cord strap, I left a bigger yarn tail than suggested in the pattern, just in case I had to make it longer to like adjust the length for my body. And I'm happy I did this because the length of the I-cord strap that's described in the pattern was way too short for me. I ended up adding about 7 centimeters to the strap, to each strap, so the underarm would fit nicely, not too high but not too low either. Once I finished knitting the top, I blocked it quite aggressively, to be honest, to try and compensate for the difference in gauge. I had more rows per centimeter in gauge, so my end project ended up shorter than expected. Therefore, I needed to try and fix this by making it taller. I'm very happy I trusted the process and tried fixing the problem through blocking. The final result is perfect, and I'm also really happy with the yarn colour I chose. I really love this dark blue, it's very nice. It's, I don't think I said it, it's Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in colourway Blue Tit. My only concern now is I hope I haven't damaged the silk yarn too much by aggressively blocking it. I'll let you know how it wears out. But yeah, I'm very happy with the final result. On to works in progress, and the first one I'm going to talk about is my very first own knitwear design, which I have named the Anabelle Scarf. It's a triangle shaped scarf with a mix of lace pattern, small cables, I-cord edging and garter stitch knitted flat. I wanted to make the knitting experience more enjoyable by adding some rows of knit stitch repeat sections. Because it's knitted flat, I didn't want to add any too many purl rows because it's just more enjoyable to knit than purl. I'm very happy with the final design. I think that the mix of cables and lace pattern makes the design look very interesting and intricate, but it's really not that difficult to knit. Maybe not for a complete beginner, but a confident beginner or someone who has knitted lace patterns before, it's easy. If you follow me on Patreon, you've already seen some sneak peeks of this pattern before and parts of the process of the design and changes I made along the way to make it more coherent and just look nicer. For those who haven't followed all of that, the lace pattern was wider in my gauge swatch, but it just didn't feel right to me, and I decided to take a section out and make it slightly smaller by about half a flower or leaf, depending on how you see it. So now they alternate, if you can see, I don't know if you can see here, but they alternate from left to right. Instead of having like 2, 1, 2, 1, they alternate like this. I find it looks a lot more organic this way, and just it makes more sense. The cables were also initially smaller, but I decided to make them bigger. They stand out more and I think they're just the perfect size. They are present, but they're not shadowing the lace pattern in any way. I started out by sketching some ideas I had in my sketchbook, and I had and still have lots of ideas of knitwear design, but I decided to concentrate on one at a time because I already wanted to knit so many other projects that I couldn't get everything done. It was too much. So once I had a pretty good idea of what the scarf would look like, I started writing the charts on Excel. I had to juggle around a lot to make the cables work with the lace pattern, especially at the tip of the scarf. Once you start the increases in the garter stitch, you basically are just repeating the pattern repeats until you hit about half of your yarn and then start the decreases. I'm currently working on the decreases. I just started them on this version anyway. and I really like how it's turning out so far. So I did block this so you could see the stitch pattern definition. When it's not blocked, you can't really see anything. The lace pattern is all scrunched up, and so it's a lot nicer this way. You can really see what's going on. I'm using Isaiah Alpaca 2 in colorway E6S, which is the nice cream color. It's a fingering weight yarn or 2-ply made with 50% alpaca and 50% wool, but any fingering weight yarn should do the trick. I could see this in a lovely hand-dyed yarn with nice color variations. That would be nice. I have started writing the pattern. I just have a few things to finish up. The charts are all done. I'm just finishing the instructions, then I have to put everything into a nice layout and design. I also want to finish my version of the scarf too. I hope to call for test knitters during August, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, August would feel right to give them enough time to knit their version and give feedback, and to leave enough time for me to make any modifications if necessary. I think that publishing the pattern before December would be nice, so October or November would feel good. So keep posted for the test knit. I will announce the test knit first on Patreon because they have early access to my test knit calls, and I will then announce it on Instagram. So if you want to be one of the first to hear about the test call and secure yourself a spot, don't forget to sign up on Patreon. There's also a 7-day free trial, just for information. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about my scarf design. I'm very proud. I'm proud of my baby. Anyway, stay tuned for the final results and yeah, and the test call. My next work in progress is the Be My Tulip top by Cami, which I cast on the 8th of July. I made a lot of progress on this in the first few days, but then I stopped knitting on it for a while because I was starting to feel like burned out a bit. I was also concentrating on my small business, on my website and all of that, and the Anabelle Scarf too, so there was a lot of things to do. Thank you, my busy neurodivergent brain. For this project, I'm using BC Gone Alino in colorway Bordeaux. This is a 50% cotton and 50% linen blend. As you can see, the yarn is slightly striped, and it gives this subtle variation in colour when knitted up, and I find it very nice. I initially bought this yarn to knit the Soft Edges top test knit for Souvenits, but the yarn was taking too much time to arrive, and then I just started the top using yarn I had in my stash, which was also BC Gone Alino, but in a different colour. Anyway, this yarn is a DK weight yarn, which is not the yarn weight recommended in the pattern. I did make a gauge swatch, and the gauge swatch was okay. It's this one here. But after experiencing my gauge problem with the Fleur Cami, I do hope that my gauge is still correct in my project. I haven't checked yet, but I will have to check that once I finish knitting the body and before starting on the top of the top. This top is worked bottom up, flat, and has a lovely lace pattern all round. It has a V-shaped neckline, and it also has some buttons down the front, which is very cute. You start by knitting a folded edge in stockinette stitch, and I find this edging very satisfying for some reason. I love the fabric the yarn gives, knitted in stockinette stitch with these 3.5mm needles. It was my first time knitting a folded edge like this, and I really liked it. It really fits the garment. So once you've knitted that edge, you start knitting the lace pattern repeat for the body. I still have about one repeat to do, one repeat or so, before separating the back and the front and the sleeves. Well, there's no sleeves, but armholes. And yeah, so far I've knitted just under 22 centimeters of the body, and it's not blocked. Quick tip here, I've learned to always separate pattern repeats with stitch markers. As you can see, they're all separated with stitch markers. It makes it so much easier to not get lost in the repeats, and also to detect any mistakes and fix them quickly. So far I'm having a really nice time knitting this top up. The instructions are very clear and the pattern repeat is very easy to remember throughout the row. So next onto my two latest cast-ons. The first one is the Seine Sweater by Marie Régnier. So before I go into the pattern, I just wanted to talk about the yarn first. Last week I tried pre-washing the yarn, which is Holzgarn Super Soft, to see if the yarn is easier on the hands when knitting with it. Holzgarn Super Soft is a yarn that still has spinning oil in it when you buy it. Therefore it is it's quite rough to the touch. When you wash your yarn or your finished garment the first time, the spinning oil will come out and the yarn will bloom a lot. I didn't film the washing process, but I will film it for the other skeins. So here's the yarn straight out of the skein and the same yarn that is pre-washed. You can see how the yarn has bloomed. I was expecting the yarn to be softer than it is after washing, but it is still very softer than the non-washed version. And this yarn is known to grow in softness and bloom a lot whenever you wash it. Every time you wash it, it's going to bloom a bit more and soften a bit more. I did knit some gauge swatches to check if there was a difference in gauge induced by the washing. The pre-washed yarn was nicer to knit with. The yarn was really less rough to the touch and more enjoyable to use. I forgot to take any footage of the swatches before blocking them. The one I did with the yarn that wasn't pre-washed was really stiff. It was a lot stiffer than the other one and you could really see the difference. The one that was pre-washed had a lot more drape to it. I blocked both of the swatches the same way. About 30 minutes in slightly warm water with a dash of yarn soap. Both of them came out similar. At first glance they do look the same, but they do have a slight difference in gauge. The pre-washed version has a slightly smaller stitch gauge. It's nothing too... it's not a huge difference between them, but the stitches seem slightly tighter and the yarn looks more bloomed. The holes between the stitches are smaller, if you know what I mean. And the version using the yarn that's straight out of the skein and not pre-washed has stitches that don't look as tight. It's a lot more see-through. So based on the gauge I got with these swatches and also the feel of the yarn while knitting the swatches, I decided to cast on the Seine Sweater using the pre-washed version. I'm using colourway Almond of the Holzgarn Super Soft for the main colour, and I'm going to use colourway Coffee for the stripes. I think these two together will look really nice. So the Seine Sweater is a lovely lace and striped jumper knitted top down. It's a raglan construction, so you increase at 4 points around the yoke, around the shoulders. There is short row shaping at the back, but it's not German short rows as I'm used to. It uses twin stitches, if I'm correct, and it was my first time using this stitch for short rows, and I found that this technique was a lot easier and that it gave a neater result than using German short rows. You start by knitting the neckline first before you start knitting on the yoke, and I found this interesting because knitting it this way you don't have any stitches to pick up at the neckline to do the edging, and it's all seamless. And the ribbing is worked in double stitch instead of 1x1 ribbing, which is nice and squishy, and it turned out really nice. I find the lace pattern really easy to remember. It looks very intricate and complicated, but actually it's really not. I barely read the charts to knit it up, to be honest. I only use them to check when I have to do any increases and also to check if my number of stitches in each section is correct. If my last stitch of the section is the same as the one in the chart, then it's all good. So far I'm having a really nice time knitting this up, and I'm very happy I tried pre-washing the yarn because it's really easier on the hands and I'm wondering if I should do this for my iris pullover, because the iris pullover also uses Horse Gone Super Soft, and I started knitting it up without pre-washing. I'm not enjoying the feel of the yarn on my hands when I'm knitting it up, which is a pity because I really like the jumper. But if I do pre-wash the yarn now, I'm afraid it's gonna change my gauge somewhat, and that it's gonna be noticeable in the finished garment. My last cast on is the Fiorita Socks by Marie-Eve Wedge. So these are gorgeous stockinette stitch socks with a cute picot edge, which is optional, and also a lovely colour work design that goes from the cuff to the toe and uses an Estonian inlay technique. So I did receive the skeins of Seine Sweater tissue I was missing to actually knit the socks up, and I cast them on yesterday. I'm using colourway Marzipan as the main colour of the sock, and I'm going to use Aitana Villa yarns Rosalind in colourway Brazil for the colour work, and I think that these yarns together will be very, very nice. Seine Sweater Sisu isn't quite the right weight yarn recommended for the socks. It is fingering weight yarn, but it's slightly thicker. Well, it looks slightly thicker than what Marie-Eve used in her version. I did make a gauge swatch using this yarn based on the stitch gauge I got, which was 30 stitches for 10 centimeters instead of 37. I calculated that to have a correct size sock to fit my feet, I need to knit size 1, which is the smallest size, and I do hope I didn't get my calculations wrong and that my stitch gauge isn't completely wrong too. We'll have to see. Also, the fabric I'm getting with this yarn and these needles, which are 2.25mm needles, is a lot denser than the fabric that Marie-Eve ends up with in her socks. And I don't know how this is going to affect the end result. I do hope it's going to stretch enough around my foot. I'll be able to put it on. I don't know. I'm having doubts. I'm a bit scared, but I think that I'm just going to trust the process, and if it doesn't fit, I'll just have to unravel everything and just start again with a bigger needle or another yarn. So as I said yesterday, I cast on my 56 stitches. I finished my first picot edge cuff, which is very cute, and I am in love with it. It's so cute. It looks so delicate and neat. It's so cute. It was my first time working a picot cuff. It's so easy to make, actually. It looks difficult, but it is so easy. Basically, you just knit a few rows. Then on one row you knit 2 together, yarn over the whole row, and then you knit again for X amount of rows, and you finish by knitting a folded edge. So you knit the live stitch with the cast on stitch and do that all around, and then that's it. I mean, not very complicated. I have knit the Setter Pro before starting the colour work, and I'm wondering if I should put these stitches on hold to knit the second cuff first before knitting the colour work and the rest of the sock. So then when I move on to the second stock, I can just start at the colour work again, and then I'm wondering if that would make it easier to finish both of them and not fall into second sock syndrome. I haven't decided yet. But yeah, it's very cute and I'm very happy with it, and even if my fabric is denser because my yarn is slightly thicker. I mean, it's supposed to be fingering weight yarn, but it's just thicker. So I think that's it for today. I don't know if I've forgotten anything. I think my brain is slightly going to sleep, so I can't even remember. I feel so tired. So my plans are to finish my Anabelle Scarf, to finish writing the pattern for my Anabelle Scarf, to get the test call launched and all of that done, and also finish working on my stitch markers, putting everything up on my website, to finally launch it too this summer. I mean, everything's nearly done. There's not that much to do. There's just a few things here and there to just finalize. And then I have all of my whips to finish, and yeah, not bad. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to follow for more content, and stay tuned for the Anabelle Scarf test haul on Instagram and my shop launch. And I think that's it. I think I'm rambling now. I think I need to rest, play some video games or knit in front of a series. Anyway, happy knitting, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!